Okay, so first off, my presentation is on assigning everything in LaunchPad, so allowing flexibility in LaunchPad to engage students based on their individual interests. So I had a friend that taught philosophy, and he was, we're talking about how, coming in as a new teacher, there's so much in the book to teach. And in a lot of ways, the first time you're teaching, you're one chapter ahead of your students. And so we're talking about all this content and this and that. But he said something that was pretty powerful. And he said, think of it this way, man. Every single chapter in that book could be a whole other class. And as a matter of fact, if we go beyond that, every single chapter in that book that we're trying to teach could be a whole career, right? And you could spend years in that section. So he said, so what are we really trying to do when we're teaching these students in an introductory class? We can't teach everything. You have to pick. You have to choose. You have to decide what is important in what I'm trying to teach. So, unfortunately, a majority of information is skipped over or only briefly mentioned due to the amount of content, and it seems kind of inevitable that you have to choose and decide what I feel is most important. So what I started realizing with my colleagues as we start talking is, some of them were dropping out certain chapters that I'm like, oh my gosh, how could you drop that chapter? And then I was like, oh, well, that part I kind of skip over. And then they're looking at me like, oh my gosh, how could you drop that, right? And then I realized, oh, this is interesting. Because what I had found, what I love teaching about isn't the same thing as you, right? So there's these conflicts. And so each class that we go into is as unique as the individuals that are in it. And we're in this age of information where our students, our children, whatever they're interested in, they'll spend a lot of time researching and going into, but their interest isn't necessarily the same as your interest. So the problem is that the instructor, in a way, dictates or decides what the information is going to be decided on. This last year, I was put in charge of our core curriculum assessment, and for those that are doing it, it can be a nightmare. And but it really got me thinking about the skills that my students are learning. And when I looked at APA and their guidelines of what they say students should learn in the class, I started noticing there was this overlap. And they said communication skills. If it's a core class, they should be learning communication. They should be learning critical thinking. They should be learning ethical and social responsibility. They should be learning empirical and quantitative skills. And so for me, I'm thinking about it, and I'm saying, okay, it's saying it both in APA, it's saying it in our core curriculum, and I'm saying, okay, so now how do I do this? How do I put this into the class along with all the other content that I need to teach? And in thinking about it a lot, it made me reorganize completely and redesign my class into something different. So what I did, as students spend time, explore, and research those things that are most relevant to them, we know that. For me as an educator, my most important thing I can do is engage you enough to get you curious enough that you want to go and look up what I'm talking about, right? I assign all the topics and activities available in LaunchPad. So this happened serendipitously because at one point, as in my redesign of my class, I started focusing, I gave them a group project. And I said, what binds our field is our science, our methodology. There's thousands of experiments, but I'm only going to show you the ones that I thought were cool, and I might be missing some. And instead, I said, okay, so I'm going to give you the tools you need to go find those experiments and think about them correctly and to think about them critically and think about how we come to the answers we do in our field. And so what serendipitously, I go in one class, and I'm not ready for it. You guys saw I was late this morning. I'm not going to apologize because you guys were mad at me because I was 1 minute late the other day. And I said, well, I'll show you what late is. And so I go into class, my redesign, and I hadn't had LaunchPad ready. And I'm there, and I'm like, oh, my gosh, I forgot to do LaunchPad. I've been working on this project. So I went in, and I assigned everything. And all of a sudden, my students all start, we have 85 assignments due in the next week. What's going on? And I'm like, well, do them all. And then they're like, are you serious? And I'm like, no, I'm not serious. I go, how about this? Accumulate 100 points. They're all worth about 5 points. Do 100 points. That's like 20 assignments. And then they're like, so which ones? No, you decide. Right? You decide. And as it progressed, and I noticed that it worked, and so I did it again, and I did it again. And now I'm at this point where this is the methodology that I use. Because in my class, I learned, we learn best by teaching, right? Once you started teaching your topic, then you really started understanding it, right? And you're like, oh, that's what they meant the whole time. So once you start teaching, so I use that principle as well. So I say, hey, look, we're going to do abnormal psychology. We're going to talk about clinical psychology. So pick your favorite disorder and go research it. Oh, you got schizophrenia? Oh, you got sleeping disorders? Oh, you got bulimia? All right, so why don't you go do it? Well, see, LaunchPad offers videos for all of these. That when you put in when you first select it, it only offers a couple videos. But when I looked at all the resources, I'm like, man, it goes on and on for days. But the way we can learn is I bring them all into my assignments. And from there, you can go and explore it. And when you present, you'll be telling us about your disorder. And yes, you're probably going to know the disorder that you taught on the most, which was of interest to you, which is why you picked it, right? But you're also going to learn from all these other individuals. So I assigned everything. So I redesigned my class, and so now it is all about learning the methods throughout the whole class period. That is what you are doing. But when we come to Unit 2, we're exploring learning, memory, sexuality, gender, and those are the topics. And again, the same thing. All right, guys, by random cards, I hand them out, and I say, all right, where are my aces? All right, aces, what is your topic? Oh, well, we want gender. Oh, we want this. Okay, cool. Now you go into gender. We'll have a date for you, but you find a cool experiment, a classic one, and I want you to summarize it. And in doing this, identify your variables. Identify your methods. This is what I want you to do. And then they do it. So I give them this, and I give them that, and I say, hey, look, it's going to be communicated by everybody. The same group members are going to be given the same grades until they all have their sheet, and they're working in their groups, and they figure it out. What I found fascinating in all of this was that the students, when I started looking at LaunchPad, they were going beyond the 100 points. And I don't give extra credit for it. They say, but mister, I did 150 points. Well, that's good for you. Do I get extra points? No. I told you to do 100, right? And then so I thought at that point when they realized, so the Unit 1, after Unit 1, and some of them went over on accident, I thought at that point, you know, Unit 2, I'm going to see 99, 101, just the bare minimum. But I started noticing this pattern that they were going beyond. And then all of a sudden we have 250 points, 378 points. And it's not just a couple of them. It was a significant amount. There was over 70%. Right now what I just did earlier this morning was I looked at 3 different classes from my spring, fall, and summer. I looked at Unit 2, because Unit 1 you could say that, oh, I didn't know the instructions, so I did them all. No, but by Unit 2 you kind of understand that I only need to do 100 points. And my number was 73.66% of people were doing more than 20% of the 100 points. And again, by a large amount. And then what I did right now, just, you know, I was interested. I got their final score in my class for fall and spring for 3 classes. I looked at all of their Unit 2 assignments. And I did a correlation between how many points they accumulated and the score in their class. And I got a Pearson's R at 0.43, which is a medium to a large theft. So, and that's the average of the Pearson correlation. So what we're finding is that the students that are doing more assignments are also, it's reflective that they're getting better grades. We know that cause doesn't necessarily mean effect, okay? So it could be that just students that are A students are going to go and do more of it. But what we are finding a strong correlation between these two things. So ultimately, I feel that in my redesign and saying that, okay, my course is now about the skills, about challenging experiments. And by the way, they come to me with such cool experiments that I haven't heard. Now I'm being updated in my own field because they're finding, they brought in a study in my human growth and development, and they talk about morality in babies, that they have an inherent morality all the way from 4 months to 8 months. And then they show this, how they do the experiment, and I'm like, no, that can't be legit. And it is. And then we have the critical thinking ability to say, but, you know, wasn't it that they just prefer one of the puppets? Oh, but sir, they had switched the puppets with a different population. Because what they did is they had one puppet act like a bad puppet and the other one is good. And then they, based on eye gaze, they measured which one the baby preferred at 4 months, and by 8 months, which one did they reach out for. And then all of a sudden, in another group of another experiment, they switched the puppets, who was good and who was bad. And guess what happened? They preferred the one that they liked. That was nicer. And so I was like, oh, awesome. And then in my sexuality class, and they're like, we can't find an experiment. I said, I heard this really cool one about exotic dancers at gentlemen's clubs, that when they were ovulating, that they were getting double the tips.
And they're like, are you doing that?
And all of a sudden, I have my students going, and they found the study. And the truth is, it's an intro class. I say, guys, if you find the real paper, that's awesome. I need you to cite it and know that it's a real experiment. I go, but in a lot of ways right now for what we're doing, I need you to have a credible source that writes about it so that you don't have to dig into all this paper. And they found the study. And they were talking about it, and their group was so excited about it. It was women, by the way. They were so excited about it. They're like, we went even further. There was a follow-up studies, and they showed this and this. And wow, fascinating. They quit school, right?
And they're taking all their courses online now.
And they work one week a month.
Now, here's the interesting thing. So I thought that based on the fact that I was doing these projects was the fact why they were going into LaunchPad and doing more assignments. But with my online classes, I hadn't set it up yet for them to be doing these projects. So for them, they have the traditional, here's your unit, there's a study guide. This is how I keep them on track when they say, well, if you allow us to study everything, what if I don't study that topic? Well, here's your study guide. This is what I'm going to test you on. But I want you the ability to explore what you find interesting. Right? And so with them, they didn't do this cool project that I'm talking about, and yet I still found the same effect that about 73% of them across the 3 classes I measured were going above the 100 points. So it wasn't necessarily my assignment. The assignment I wanted to add in there as well. I thought I was going to find an effect, but for me, it allows me engagement. Like Erica said, I want to start recording some of my lectures because the happiest times we had in class was when they were there talking in their groups, and they're like, what experiment are we going to do? But we don't understand the independent variable. And I was telling someone last night how these famous experiments like the Stanford prison experiments and Milgram, you know, when we started looking at methodology, and they're all, sir, what's the control group? And then I'm sitting there for the first time like, oh, damn, there's no control group. And I'm realizing these things. But they really engage when they have to present this cool experiment. And now, you can ask me, they don't know everything that all the content that my other classes used to because I required a lot more content. I've had to cut out a lot of content. But here's the thing. Now they have the methodology and the tools to go explore any experiment that they want. If they leave with the critical thinking skills of seeing a study in the news and then all of a sudden and saying, oh, but you know what, that's a correlation, then I think I've succeeded in helping my students learn some valuable skills, and at the expense of not teaching everything in the content. And that is my presentation.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
Are you getting any pushback, feedback stuff from people who teach the subsequent course, and they say, oh, he took the course with Nick and he doesn't know X, Y, and Z that was supposed to be taught to him or her?
No, I've actually got the opposite. So I had some students say that they went to the university and they were like, I'm glad I was in your class ready to go. Because I was able to ask all these questions. They're like, how do you know this and that?
Right.
And so I got that other response. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you lecture at all in the class?